Welcome, everyone. This webinar will begin shortly. We are very excited to welcome you to learn more about some new programs at the National Institute on Aging Small Business Programs. Before we begin, we just want to go over a few housekeeping items with you. We want this to be an interactive session. This is designed to help you better understand the funding opportunities and how to apply. And we want to answer any questions you may have. So we will have a dedicated Q&A portion of this webinar. However, please feel free to chat us through the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. And if you actually open it up, you can have it ready and up on the right. And also, I would also encourage you to open up your chat because we're going to be including some good links for you to be able to see what we're talking about. So if you want to open up the Q&A window and chat, that might be helpful to you. We are offering closed captioning and Zoom technical support. And we do want your feedback. So we'll also ask you to open up a SurveyMonkey link, and we'd love to hear from you on what you thought about this webinar, whether you want additional information, as well as if you're interested in setting up a one-on-one meeting. We do invite you to stay connected with us. Follow us on Twitter, as well as connect with us on LinkedIn. So today we're going to do an overview of the REDI programs and then dive down a little bit more specifically, and then we'll have our moderated Q&A. And we have links to the REDI page in case you want to scan those pages as well that we've included in the chat. I also just want to thank Saroj Regmi while we move to the next slide. He's going to be giving a fantastic overview of the REDI program. And you'll also see that I'll be your moderator for today. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Saroj, who's going to dive really deeply into the REDI program, tips for applying, and help respond to your questions.
Thank you, Monique, for the introduction today, and thank you for joining this webinar. I'm really excited to talk to you about a series of funding opportunities under the REDI umbrella. So if you look at the slideshow, this chart here from ASCD and Compass, it actually shows us the trajectory of US biology PhD students. What's really clear from here is that, majority of PhDs do not become tenure track faculty. In fact, only anywhere between 20 to 30% of them get tenure track faculty positions within 6 years post-PhD. But then, the current academic training at the PhD level, as well as at the postdoc level, does not reflect this fact. It is important to understand right now, therefore, that faculty job is actually an alternative career path. It is not the path of the majority. So this has been recognized by the NIH leadership. So the NIH Biomedical Research Workforce Working Group that was led by former Princeton President, Dr. Shirley Tilghman, as well as former NIH Deputy Director for Extramural Research, Dr. Sally Rocky. They made a number of recommendations to bring this training program at the NIH level in line with this reality. So there were three major recommendations. Among them, number one was, better align training. So basically align training with the current job market. Number two, supplement training grants. So basically the idea here is to create programs to supplement training grants to provide additional avenues for training, additional training opportunities. And finally, leveraging the SBIR STTR program. So basically award and encourage SBIR STTR awardees to provide internships to trainees. So in line with this, various programs have been established both within the NIH and outside. Within the NIH, some of the ones to note are the SHIFT program. This was a program that was launched a couple of years ago, and this was a program which allowed early career scientists to work as at a startup as a PI. And while this program was discontinued, we at the NIA found this program to be quite helpful in promoting entrepreneurship. Given the relative success of SHIFT, we're thinking about the needs of trainees to better understand their requirements. And so what we did was we conducted a lot of interviews and learned from various programs and institutions about entrepreneurship-focused programs. And so based on these programs, we actually piloted a program at the NIA for intramural fellows, postdoc fellows that are at NIA. And we felt that we learned enough to offer a program to fellows outside of the NIH. Next slide. So based on the research in our program, we wanted to understand what constitutes a good program. And so given our research and talking to various stakeholders, we found out the following. Basically, immersive experiences, internships are extremely useful. Trainees at different stages have different needs. So, graduate students versus senior postdocs have different needs. So programs need to be able to cater to trainees at various stages. Finally, there are a lot of career opportunities. So as shown in my earlier slide, there are a lot of career choices. So we need a wide training program that is required so that trainees don't feel like they're pigeonholed into one career. So to summarize everything, we basically learned that one size does not fit all. And so that's why, if you go to the next slide, we came up with the REDI umbrella. We created a suite of programs that we believe will empower the next generation of scientists, entrepreneurs. What I'd like to really highlight is, we under this REDI umbrella, REDI standing for Research and Entrepreneurial Development Immersion, we keep the definition of entrepreneurship really broad. We're not only thinking about startups, we really encourage that, but for our training programs, we encourage you to consider wide-ranging opportunities such as, it may be IP, regulatory affairs, consulting, drug discovery, startups, science, education, business of science, and things like that. So we have a really broad definition of entrepreneurship for the REDI program. So these opportunities, there are three different opportunities. So there's the REDI Mentored Entrepreneurial Career Development Award, REDI Entrepreneurship Enhancement Award, which is for course development, and also Entrepreneurial Small Business Transition Award. So there are these three different suite of programs that we've developed. And if you go to the next slide, you'll see that there are basically four different funding opportunities that we've announced for these three different programs. So the first one is a K01. This is for postdocs that are thinking about entrepreneurship. Second one is an R25, which is for course development. And the final two are SBIR and STTR awards, respectively. So for this portion of the talk, for the first hour, I'll be focusing on the K01 as well as the SBIR and STTR award, just to give you a flavor of these three different programs to, for you to determine what would be the best fit as you're thinking about an entrepreneurial training program. Yep, so basically, why seek K01 award? So basically these K01 awards, this is the first award that I was talking about, they fund protected research time to learn new skills beyond a traditional grant. So these awards, allow postdoctoral fellows that have at least 2 years of postdoctoral experience to explore various career opportunities, spend 20 to 30% of their effort on these activities. They can foster early independence. And we believe, given the fact that, you get salary as well as, money for, pursuing these activities, they help attract additional funding or support. And we also think that the REDI K01 may be a gateway to other entrepreneurial opportunities, such as SBIR, or, directly entrepreneurial career paths. So, let's take a deeper dive into the K01 program. So the purpose of the K01, as I mentioned earlier, is to provide protected time, between 3 to 5 years. And it's very important that you think about, whether you want to do something for 3 years or 5 years. And we're open to, any of those timelines for a supervised career development experience leading to research independence. So we encourage you to do entrepreneurship training in a field relevant to the mission of the NIA. So the goal is basically you continue doing your research, postdoctoral training, but now you're aside certain time learning about entrepreneurship in an area that is, within the mission space of the National Institute on Aging, and that would be Alzheimer's disease and aging. So, one of the requisites of the K01 program, because this would be a training program, is that we require that you have two mentors. First would be a research mentor, and the second would be your entrepreneurial mentor. So a research mentor could be your, postdoctoral supervisor, could be someone who you can get a lot of, mentorship regarding the research part of your project, and research leader with scientific expertise. And an entrepreneurial mentor could be head of a small business, could be head of an accelerator, could be, someone from a tech transfer office at your institution. We highly encourage that you think about internships, shadowing opportunities, as well as externships. We think, as I alluded to earlier, it is really important, as you're thinking about entrepreneurial training, that, immersive experiences tend to be really useful. We therefore really encourage you to spend time with, startup, local biotech company, foundations, life science investment firms, or any other relevant organizations that you think would be beneficial as you're thinking about your training. SBIR STTR grant writing can also be considered a part of the training if you think that, after the end of your K01, you're ready to make the jump to an SBIR STTR award. SBIR STTR grant writing can be really useful as well. So in terms of eligibility, I think I did talk about, postdocs that have at least 2 years minimum of postdoctoral experience. We also encourage applications from recently appointed junior faculty. However, they may not have received a prior R01, P01, P50, or any other major career grants. This K01 award is limited to applicants that are citizens or non-citizen national of the US. And also, permanent residents of the US are also eligible to apply. And they would have to be a permanent resident at the time of award. We highly encourage application from individuals with underrepresented racial and ethnic backgrounds, as well as disability. So like I mentioned earlier, right? So you need to think about that 3 to 5 year time frame, whether you want to do something for 3 years or you would like to, take advantage of all 5 years. In terms of salary, this award affords you $90,000 in salary, and you get $50,000 in training costs. Please note that this is annual. So for every year of your training, you would get $90,000 in salary and $50,000 in training costs. The deadline is November 15th, 2022. And let's, take a little deeper dive into the review criteria. So first of all, we're looking at, the candidate, of course, given that this is a K award. We look at the potential of the candidate for entrepreneurship training. We also want to see the commitment to entrepreneurial training and see if this is a good fit, given their background and their prior history, whether they have the potential and interest in entrepreneurial training. They need to furnish a career development plan. The plan, we want to see whether this is well thought out, appropriate, and whether this will lead to success. Research plan. This will be judged based on scientific merit and relevance, whether they've thought of appropriate methods, they've thought of, potential pitfalls in their research plan, and also relevance. Mentor. So, we look at appropriateness of mentors as well. So whether, the two mentors, the entrepreneurial mentor, as well as research mentor, whether they're appropriate, whether they have prior history of, successful mentorship. This will be important. And finally, environment. Commitment to training and research facilities. So these are the 5 primary review criteria for a K01.
And Saroj, there's a question that I wanted to flag for you. Someone is asking, is this for postdocs only?
The K01, yes. The SBIR STTR award not, and I'll talk about that later. But for the K01, this is for postdocs and recently junior faculty. So if you've done at least 2 years of postdoctoral experience, and you don't have a prior, awards that I alluded to earlier, then you remain eligible. You cannot have R1s grants or any other major grants in order to be eligible.
And then, Saroj, what % effort do you expect a postdoc to dedicate to the work proposed in REDI K01?
So the expectation is anywhere between 20 to 30%, but we are cognizant of the fact that there might be certain months and years where they might be, they may be able to do less. So, it would really depend on the candidate. As long as there's enough dedicated time to demonstrate that the candidate is serious about entrepreneurial training, I think that should suffice.
And then we're getting a slew of nice questions here. So for the K01, is this a transitionary award where the funding carry over to your independent role when you finish your postdoctoral position? And they're just referencing the K99 and ROO that carries over, or does the funding end when you leave?
So if you leave your postdoctoral position, the funding will leave. The goal of so you brought a really nice comparison when you talk about the K99 ROO. The K01 award is sort of like the K99 portion of a research grant, and our goal actually is that the SBIR STTR award acts like the ROO portion. So we hope that a lot of K1 awardees will apply for the SBIR STTR program, and then they will be successful. So there is not a transition component to a K1. However, given the fact that our anticipation is that a lot of the K1 awardees will not, go to academia afterwards.
Right.
They may, but they won't. We don't expect that.
And what about instructors? Are they eligible for K01?
Instructors maybe, if they, it really depends, they can be, but I think, it would have to be on a case-by-case basis. If they have not, gotten, may remain eligible. We can talk about that offline on a one-on-one basis.
And a few more, we'll just stick here on K01 since we see there are a lot of questions here. What happens if someone is promoted during the period?
So if they are a postdoc, if they remain in the same institution, I think this would again be on a case-by-case basis. So it's hard to have a definitive answer.
Okay, so we'll try to go through a few more questions just quickly because I know there's a lot right here, and then we'll go back over and folks will also show you how to do one-on-one meetings for specific questions. But we are getting some folks who are assistant professors who are asking about, when specifically could they be eligible? Can first-year docs be eligible? Maybe if you can clarify on the eligibility component.
Yeah, so if you go to the slide 16, so 2 slides before this, Monique or Melissa.
Yep.
Yes, so I think we've laid out the eligibility criteria here quite well. So postdocs that have at least 2 years of postdoctoral experience, recently appointed junior faculty, they remain eligible as long as they don't have a prior R01, K01, P50, or any other major career grant that includes K01, K07, 8, K22, 23, 25, 76, as well as the K99 R00. And if they are permanent residents or citizens of the US, if all of these eligibility criteria are met, then they remain eligible.
I want to thank the participants for sending questions. We'll take 2 more and then we'll continue with the presentation. It's been nice and interactive. So if someone has an SBIR STTR award now, would they be eligible to apply for the REDI SBIR STTR award?
No, they would not. So, I haven't talked about the SBIR STTR. I can go about that later, but they would not remain eligible if they already have an SBIR award.
Okay, and what about if they passed and it's no longer active?
They still would not. So our goal is, for people that have not had an SBIR or an R01 award, those are the ones that remain eligible for the SBIR STTR transitional.
Perfect. Thank you. And then I just wanted to add a clarification on there was a question about the % effort do you expect a postdoc to dedicate to the work proposed in the REDI K01? 75% effort is required for the K01. Of that, 20 to 30% of that time should be spent on the entrepreneurial and related training. I hope that helps. And we'll just be watching the questions as you are asking clarifying questions. We will address those throughout to make this interactive. Thank you so much to everyone who sent their questions in. And Suraj, if you would continue on with the presentation and we'll watch for additional questions.
Sure. So if you could go move to the next slide. And the slide after, I think I already covered that. Excuse me. So let's move on to the second part of the REDI program, the SBIR STTR awards. So seek the REDI SBIR STTR award. First, they allow you to serve as a PDPI on an SBIR grant. So you actually learn by doing. You understand, how to run, become a PI on a startup grant. They also afford you entrepreneurial training opportunities. So unlike other SBIR awards, we actually, ask that you spend some time on entrepreneurial training activities, whether they be I-Core, whether they be business school courses, whether they be an MBA or things like that. And we also think the fact that you've already become a PDPI on an SBIR grant, that this will help you attract additional funding as well as so. So the REDI SBIR and STTR, that utilizes R41, 42, 43, and 44 mechanisms. This is very similar to the normal SBIR STTR program. However, the emphasis here is on the entrepreneurial training, mentoring, and the career development of the PDPI, program director, program principal investigator. So, it's very important that, career development plan is highlighted. It is required. That talks about the background of the applicant, that talks about the project fit and the mentoring plan. Yeah, like I said earlier, you need a plan for entrepreneurial training, you need a plan for career development, there needs to be a mentoring plan, and you need a letter of support from a dedicated mentor. In terms of eligibility, it can be postdocs, or even PhD students that are in their final year of finishing their terminal degree. We understand that when you're a PhD student, it's really hard to run a small business. So, we anticipate that if you are about to finish up your PhD and you can furnish a letter stating that you remain eligible. People with master's degree are allowed to apply. They are eligible. And we say early stage investigators that don't have a prior R01 or SBIR funding remain eligible with no more than 10 years post-terminal degree. So you have to be within 10 years of your master's or your PhD to remain eligible. But the other eligibility is very similar to that of an SBIR STTR award. Individuals with underrepresented racial and ethnic backgrounds as well as disabilities are strongly encouraged to apply. So in terms of eligibility, like I said, the rest of the eligibility is very similar to that of a normal SBIR STTR award. You have to remember that a major difference between a K01 and an SBIR is that K01 is awarded to an individual. The SBIR award is awarded to the small business, wherein the individual acts as a PDPI. Applicant must be a small business. They need to be organized for-profit U.S. business. It should have 500 or fewer employees. In reality, a majority of the applications we receive in the SBIR program, there are less than 20 employees. They must be more than 50% owned by U.S. individuals and independently operated. So the REDI SBIR STTR, this can be up to a 5-year award depending on what phase you take. So phase 1 is for early sort of prototype development, and fast track is wherein you combine a phase 1 and a phase 2. So we allow either a phase 1 or a fast track. And so we allow $400,000 if it's a phase 1 application, or up to $2 million if it's a fast track application. The deadline for this is actually February 17th or 16th, 17th, I think, 2023, but the letter of intent is due on 17th of January, 2023. The review criteria, are as follows. So, significance, whether the product addresses an important problem and has a commercial potential. Is there a market? We think about the investigator as well, whether the investigator, could benefit from entrepreneurial training, whether, they are appropriate to carry out the research activity. We think about the innovation, how novel is the technology and product and approaches used, what's the competitive advantage. Approach, whether the approaches are well developed and appropriate, potential pitfalls addressed. Environment, does the environment contribute to probability of success? Is there appropriate facilities? Is there independence? Is there mentorship? Because mentorship here is a component here as well. And commercialization, is the company's business strategy one that has a high potential for success? So like I said, the additional requirement here is a career development plan, which should be maximum of 3 pages. This should talk about the background of the PI in terms of, their background in entrepreneurship as well as their interest. It should talk about the project fit, whether the project is a good fit considering the background of the principal investigator. It should furnish an entrepreneurial training and career development plan that should include courses, internships, mentorship, conferences, workshops, and a panoply of other, training modules. Mentoring plan, whether mentoring activities will be performed, what kind of activities will be performed, how frequent will be the meeting with mentors, what that will entail. A letter of support from the mentor is also required in this case. And like I said, given that this SBIR STTR is geared towards early career investigators that are interested in entrepreneurship, additional review criteria will focus on entrepreneurship development. How likely is the career development plan? How likely is it that it will enable the PDPI to gain product development knowledge as well as relevant entrepreneurial training? Is the mentorship appropriate? Are the entrepreneurial training programs and facilities appropriate to ensure that the PDPI is appropriately trained? And also, like I said, does the mentor have a strong track record of mentorship? That will be critical as well. And so, I think if you're thinking about REDI K01 versus REDI SBIR STTR, I think, there are 2 things you might want to consider, in terms of your background, entrepreneurial readiness, are you ready, in terms of, to make the plunge, to start your own company or to work for a startup? If you are, then the SBIR STTR would be appropriate. However, SBIR STTR application requires company formation and focus on commercialization, right? So the two things to think about is entrepreneurial readiness and idea readiness. So K01 is a better fit for you to explore career opportunities if you want to do that exploring while you remain a postdoc, while you are working in a bench or in front of a computer. I think that might be a better fit. But if your idea is really ready, you're ready to start a company and launch it, then in that case, an SBIR STTR would be a better fit. And if you are unsure, you can always reach out to us, and we're happy to have a conversation and determine what the best fit for you is. One thing that I highlighted earlier is you need to remember that K01 is awarded to an individual, while SBIR STTR is awarded to a small business. And so I just wanted to bring this in just for you to think about, even within the SBIR STTR programs, there's the SBIR program and the STTR program. So if you want to, ensure whether you want to go the SBIR route or the STTR route, this chart here might be useful. So basically SBIR grants permit that, research institution partners with universities, but STTR requires it. So if you, want to have a research institution partner, STTR might work out. In terms of, outsourcing of activities, SBIR allows you to outsource 33% of activities in phase 1, while 50% of activities can be outsourced in a phase 2. In terms of the STTR, the for-profit small business should conduct a minimum of 40% of the work, and the non-profit US research institutions should conduct a minimum of 30%. So there should be 40% done at startup, small business, 30% at university or in the nonprofit, and you have a little bit of a latitude in terms of who's going to do the last 30%. In terms of eligibility, the PDPI for an SBIR, their primary employment must be with the small business for the duration of the project. For an STTR, an agreement providing necessary IP rights to a small business is required to carry out follow-on R&D and commercialization, and principal investigator must spend at least 10% of their effort on the project. So I hope this kind of clarified whether you want to go the K01 route or the SBIR STTR route, and also whether you want to do SBIR or an STTR. Yes.
Before we go into the tips, I love the interactivity of everyone who's participating, and there are a couple of announcements I just will make because we're getting questions about whether you receive a copy of these slides. We will share these slides after the presentation and a couple of links with you all, so you have time. I know if you may want to analyze the differences between the 3 programs and see which one is the right fit for you and your organization. So look out for that. And there are a couple of questions that relate to the REDI program that people are trying to understand as it relates to SBIR. So if someone is interested in the SBIR REDI program, can the applicant already work in the small business for a couple of years?
They could have worked on a small business, but they have to, they have to demonstrate that they benefit from the entrepreneurial training that is required. Reviewers might, think that, the fact that they've already worked at a startup for a number of years, they may not need that training. So they have to demonstrate that need. That's number one. And number 2, they may not be the PI, PD on the grants. If they've already become a PI on an SBIR award, then they remain ineligible.
Wonderful. And we'll take one more question and then move on to the next section. How much does the career development plan weigh in on comparison to the rest of the proposal?
It is an important component. So it's one of those review criteria. And so it's really hard to affix a certain percentage or number, but for the SBIR STTR, it is really critical that, career development plan is well thought out, and, that it helps the, PDPI, gain independence in terms of, entrepreneurship.
Wonderful. Thank you. And everyone, please feel free to continue to send your questions. We'll now provide some tips for a successful application and then answer a few more questions for you. Thank you, Saroj. Please continue.
Thanks. So, one suggestion that I'll make is, as you're thinking about developing your first draft, especially that specific aims page, we're happy to talk to you to discuss your specific aims, to discuss, what might be the best fit, and to provide feedback. So, reach out to us as soon as possible, at least 1 month in advance. I know the K01 application deadline is November 15th, so the earlier you do, the better. And there is still some time with the SBIR STTR ones, but reach out to us. Don't wait till the last minute and talk to us. And you can reach out to us at NIA Small Business at mail.nih.gov. So the other thing that you need to think about is the scientific fit. So the NIA has 4 research divisions, and you need to think about whether your proposal fits in and aligns well with the mission space of the National Institute on Aging. So the 4 divisions are Division of Aging Biology. This division provides a basis in basic biology for preventative and interventional strategies to increase resilience and extend healthy aging. There's also the Division of Behavioral and Social Research, which supports research as well as training on aging processes, both at the individual as well as societal levels. There's the Division of Geriatrics and Clinical Gerontology that supports research on health and diseases in older adults, and also looking at health outcomes as with human lifespan. And there's the Division of Neuroscience that focuses on neural and behavioral processes associated with aging brain, with a particular emphasis on Alzheimer's disease. Alzheimer's disease is one of the highest priorities of the National Institute on Aging. The other thing that you can do, the fact that these awards, the K01 and SBIR STTR awards, these are in their 2nd year now. These were launched last year, and so you can actually go to NIH Reporter and see what kind of applications were funded. That will enable you to learn a little bit more about the research space that we funded in the past. It's a really nifty tool, and so I highly encourage you to check that out. We also have sample applications for SBIR and STTR applications. Some portion of that might be useful as well as you think about your SBIR, STTR applications. So another trick is the SF424 application guide. This is a great resource, and you should use this guide if you have any questions about the submission process. You'll be able to do a keyword search on the document and clearly understand the application questions. What I will highlight here is that the SF424 is going to be different for K01 and SBIR. So, for career development instructions, there'll be a different form. And for SBIR, STTR, there'll be different forms. There are also annotated forms that are available that, again, differ based on whether you're going to go the K01 common route or the SBIR, STTR route. But, annotated application forms are really useful. They lay out how the application form looks like, and also, help you understand what each question needs. Start early. That's something that I highly recommend. You don't want to wait till the last minute. Strong proposals take time to develop. Really carefully read the funding solicitation and allow time to address all the requirements. Make sure you read the eligibility page. Make sure you read what is it that the FOA is asking for, and gain access to equipment, facilities, and other resources, as well as letters of support from collaborators, as well as mentors wherever appropriate, depending on the award. Follow the SF424 application guideline. And think about these registrations. So, for SBIR, there are these mandatory registrations that you require, and there are also other requirements for K01, such as the ORCID ID. So you need to be thinking about all of these requirements, get them out of the way so that you have enough time. And, I'm happy to talk to you about the K01 and SBIR STTR opportunities, as long as, and you can schedule a one-on-one with me. I encourage that you first email me at NIA Small Business. So that we can talk about, if there's something that I can answer via email, I think that might be the faster route, but I'm also happy to do a one-on-one with you. I'm available via Calendly, and I think my Calendly link has just been shared in the chat, but I'm always happy to talk to you about any particular questions that you may have. With that, I think I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Saroj. And perhaps you want to give a heads up before we get started with the Q&A about what you'll be covering at around the 1 o'clock hour, in case there are folks who want to stick on for that.
Yeah, definitely. So, from 1 hour to 2, I will be covering the REDI R25. These are institutional grants. These are awarded to educational institutions, nonprofits, as well as for-profits that are developing coursework around entrepreneurship. The goal here is to train PhD students, postdocs, and undergraduates in entrepreneurship. So if that's an interest, that's of an interest to you, stick around for that 1 p.m. presentation.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thanks.
A couple of questions that relate to the program overview, specifically trying to understand the difference between SBIR CTR versus the REDI version of it. So the person is asking, do they understand that the application is basically a standard SBIR CTR proposal with an added REDI section? So the REDI is not a supplement to an existing SBIR, is that correct?
That's right. Yeah. So the application process is very similar. I mean, like I alluded to earlier, I think the only difference is, furnishing that 3-letter, 3 pages of, career development plan, mentorship plan, letters of recommendation from your mentors. That highlights the major difference. The other thing is also, in terms of budgeting, you can budget, expenses for entrepreneurial training of the PDPI in the REDI SBIR program, as opposed to the normal SBIR.
And we often hear from folks who are trying to understand what is more likely to be a winning proposal. So does one have an impact on the ability to be a successful applicant?
Could you rephrase that? What do you mean?
So if someone chooses to submit a REDI proposal, does it give them any winning advantage over just submitting straight to SBIR? And how will they be evaluated differently?
That's a great point. And I think I should have highlighted that better during my presentation. But the major difference here is, if you apply to the SBIR STTR application, you're competing with all the SBIR STTR applications. For the REDI, you are competing with other early stage applications that are within 10 years of their terminal degree, number one. Number two is that the review process will happen in-house. And so, these two advantages are, you have for the REDI application. And so you are competing with, cohort that is within 10 years of the terminal degree.
Thank you, Saroj. And based on some of the questions I've seen, it seems that we may have a few, people who have an existing or have had an existing SBIR CTR. And I just wanted to give you an opportunity, Saroj, if someone is an awardee, perhaps you may want to share information about the diversity supplement, since that is another opportunity if someone's an existing awardee to accomplish some of the goals.
Absolutely, yeah. So if you already have an SBIR STTR award and you are, if you're interested in working for a startup, and if, you could consider applying using the diversity supplement mechanism, wherein the startup will apply on your behalf. They will furnish a strong career development plan for you and you get to work for a startup. So that's another way. Thank you for bringing that up, Monique.
Thank you. I think there is still some confusion on the requirements for eligibility. So the person is saying, how is it that a PA must have at least 2 years post-PhD training, but can also be a PhD student or master's degree holder? I know when you were talking about eligibility, there were a couple of different types of categories. So it's not, those two things. If you want to just give another summary of eligibility.
Definitely, yeah, I think so. The confusion might have been with the K01 versus SBIR STTR. So for the K01 award, you have to have 2 years of postdoc experience, or you should be a junior faculty. So that's the expectation. For the SBIR award, you can be someone who has a master's, who has a master's degree training, or who's a postdoc. We don't allow PhD students because we think, the PhD training is intensive, and so you may not have the bandwidth to, work as a PDPI on the start. However, having said that, if you're within 1 year of finishing your PhD, if you will finish your PhD at the time of you receiving the grant, then you remain eligible, provided that you can furnish a letter stating that you will graduate in that time. So for the SBIR STTR, you're eligible if you're within 10 years of your terminal degree and have a master's degree. So that's the eligibility. I hope this clarifies things.
Thank you. And someone is asking about whether they can find sample REDI applications. I know that we do have SBIR and STTR sample applications. So that is something that you can use on our NIA website, and we'll chat that link out. But Saroj, is there anything else you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, so this has been a pilot for us, and this is a second year in the running. So unfortunately, we don't have a sample REDI SBIR or REDI K01 application, but the SBIR applications are available online for you to check out. There might also be, sample K01 applications that may be available through your educational institution. I also believe, NIAID might have one K01 application, but please, remember that this K01 is very different from a traditional K01 grant in terms of eligibility and also in terms of focus. So, it might be good for you to learn about this, but, think what might be even more advantageous is the SF424, really looking at that application guide and then submitting it based on the requirements and reading the FOA carefully. I think those might be beneficial.
Thank you. Another good question about whether for the REDI SBIR STTR are TABA budgets allowable?
Absolutely, they are allowable. You can submit, $6,500 if you're in a phase 1 part of the application. If you apply for the fast track, then you can, request $6,500 for a phase 1 and $50,000 for a phase 2. Please note that there is no direct to phase 2, allowed for the REDI SBIR STTR. So you'll either be able to apply for phase 1 or a fast track.
Thank you. Can a REDI K01 be added to an existing CRP grant?
No, CRP grants are completely different. They have a different focus, and CRP you can only apply to once you have a SBIR phase 2. Once you're in a phase 2 of an SBIR grant, you can, but there's no connection between a K01 and a CRP.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And are co-PIs eligible for the REDI SBIR STTR?
So in the first year they were, but we realized that we really want to emphasize the entrepreneurial training of a PI. So co-PIs are not allowed. You're allowed to have other kind of designations, but there will only be one PI on an SBIR STTR.
Thank you. Is REDI only offered by the National Institute on Aging Small Business Program?
Yes, that is correct.
Thank you. And related to that, someone is asking, they have a drug development company focusing on identification of potential drugs that alter lifespan, and it relates to treatment of cancer, but also other aging-related diseases. They're asking, should they still talk to you about whether NIA is appropriate, or should they go to NCI?
Yeah, so NCI has a different version of the transition award. I think they have a STTR fast track. But if it fits within the purview of SBIR STTR within the mission space of the NIA, I'm happy to talk. What might be better is if you send me your one-page specific aims page to NIA smallbusiness@mail.nih.gov, we can take it from there.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Related to how NIA is set up, do the 4 research divisions furnish 4 separate REDI K01 review committees?
No, once we receive, one of the beauties of the REDI K01 is that once we receive application from you, and that's, based off of that, we have an in-house. So the NIA, the scientific review office within the NIA actually will assemble a panel of reviewers based on the application. And so we really have, I think, a REDI focused review panel, but that happens within the NIA. I hope that answers your question.
It does, thank you. You encourage diverse applicants to apply. The question is, how does disability of the applicant factor into the application of either grant, and how can that information be safely submitted and reviewed?
So, I think, you can talk about, your background, especially with the K, I think it's very easy to do that. But, if prior, examples, so last year when we launched this program, we're surprised by the, the number of, diverse applications as well as number of, successful diverse applications. So I think we're quite positive in that, we will be able to, afford this award to a lot of diverse individuals.
Thank you. This is an example of a university. At Emory, they have an entrepreneurial incubator. Theirs is called Hatchery, and it focuses on undergraduate student entrepreneurs. How can REDI be used to support undergraduates, if at all?
That's a great question. And so, I will be talking at 1 p.m. about the R25 portion of the program. And I think, that might be an avenue for the Hatchery to pursue, especially if they can also cater to PhD students and postdocs. I think that might be a nice nifty way of being able to support entrepreneurial training of PhD students and postdocs.
And can you comment about whether recipients are able to take classes at business schools affiliated with the university? And
Absolutely. Absolutely, they are. We allow them to take classes. Some of them have even considered doing an MBA.
Perfect. And are the courses usually covered by the department hiring a recipient, negotiating the contract? Are there any specific, things they have to consider when they're trying to do that kind of approach?
Yeah, so I think a couple of things to consider is your workload, right? I mean, whether you get a letter of support from your mentor suggesting that you have that bandwidth to carry out whatever it is that you want to carry out, especially for a K01, that becomes important. And so you need to think about your workload. And the other thing is, for a K01, we provide up to 50,000 of that cost. So, that, partially can go into that, business school class course expense. It is up to you how you, suggest what kind of activities you wish to pursue and how that will strengthen you. I mean, if you also have to justify that you need that business school course to carry out what you want to carry out. So, it all depends on you and your stage and the relevance of the training.
Wonderful. I just want to say I appreciate all the questions. No question is too small or too big. We're here to help you be successful and to figure out which program you should apply for. We have a few more questions, Suroj, and thank you. I was just giving you also a little rest there. But I would just also encourage people to open the feedback form because we'd love to hear from you more on what additional information are you looking to gather to be able to apply. What if you're finding that it might be challenging to apply, what are those barriers for you? Help us understand what it would take for you to be successful and actually submitting an application. We want to be here and help you. And also please do, seriously consider scheduling a one-on-one meeting. We find that these questions are very helpful and you might have specific things that you need help better understanding and talking about one-on-one. So Suroj, for the K01, can you also comment on the MD PhD eligibility for folks who are residency or fellowship trained?
Absolutely. So they are eligible. We have actually, I think, in the past, we have awarded a K01 to an MD PhD.
Wonderful. So a couple questions about mentorship now. So for the REDI SBIR STTR, is the mentoring plan for that of entrepreneurship? Do they need to consider mentoring in another fashion?
So, STTR will, for that, the, mentorship will be very entrepreneurial focused. So, entrepreneurship training of the candidate, regular discussions, coursework, workshops, I-Core training, things like that. But, it has to be, entrepreneurially focused.
And for mentorship, does it mean that a participant has a mentor assigned to them or the applicant is the mentor to non-participants?
So for mentorship, for the K01, you're required to have two mentors. So the K01 applicant will have two mentors. One will be an entrepreneurial mentor. One will be a research mentor. So both of these will provide guidance to the applicant as they're thinking about entrepreneurial training. For the SBIR STTR, they will require one entrepreneurial mentor who's going to provide guidance. So the applicant will be the PDPI, principal investigator, and they will be mentored by someone who's senior, who's had a lot of experience in entrepreneurship and has a successful track record of mentorship in entrepreneurship.
Thank you. We're getting some very specific questions about different kinds of funding opportunities for the development of an AI-based tool. I'm going to encourage you for those kinds of very specific questions. I would encourage you to reach out to Suroj directly and then discuss more about your questions and what is the right thing to apply for and when.
Yeah, I think, email me at nismallbusiness@mail.nih.gov and we can talk. But what you mentioned, I think that AI/ML tool, I think you mean the contract topic. So, you can apply to the contract topic and also, to the REDI SBIR STTR if you have not become if you remain eligible for REDI, but, you need to have different you cannot have the same scientific premise for both. There needs to be, different projects that you apply for. You cannot double dip in essence.
Thank you, Suroj. Again, if you want to learn more about the institutional opportunities, please stick around and we will share these slides. Please also use this QR code to visit some of the links. We'd love for you to sign up for our funding opportunities that come to you via email. And you can also follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter. I'm just watching to see if there are any more questions, Saroj, and then we'll take a quick pause and then reconvene at 1 o'clock on the same link. Okay. Saroj, any last words of wisdom from you to folks who are thinking about these opportunities?
Reach out. If you have any questions, email me. I'm happy to do one-on-ones, but there's not a lot of time. So think about that application. Think about all the requirements for application. Make sure you have all the registrations and things like that knocked out. And if you need to talk to your postdoc supervisor, have that conversation early so that you're set and you don't wait till the last minute.
That's a good point, especially if you're thinking about the SBIR STTR. You do need a good amount of time to apply. And there are some really good tips. We shared the fact sheet that we have on all the registrations that are needed. Well, thank you everyone for joining. If you want to stick around to learn more, Saroj, perhaps just give a quick preview of what we're going to cover in the next 2 minutes.
Yeah, so I'll be talking about the R25 for educational institutions for coursework in entrepreneurial training. So stick around if that's of an interest to you.
Thank you.